Today, Sage is known as one of the weakest characters in Valorant. She sees almost no pro pick rate and is outshined by many other Sentinels. But what if I told you that Sage used to be the best agent in the entire game? This is the full timeline of how Sage went from the strongest to the weakest agent in Valorant. On April 7th, 2020, Valorant was playable for the first time in beta. And with people finally getting their hands on this game for the first time, everyone was in a mad scramble to find the best and worst agents. Well, there are several agents that were quickly identified as strong. One stood up above the rest, and that was Sage, as undoubtedly the only triple S tier agent. From early tournaments to pro play, Sage was undoubtedly the strongest character. And as people started to climb, more and more people felt a reliance on Sage, to the point where if you didn't have a Sage, you were actively putting yourself at a huge disadvantage, and some people would even claim that you were throwing. Now, looking at Sage now, you might be wondering, why back then was Sage so damn strong? Was the game just way underpowered compared to now? Well, actually no. Sage is currently a shell of her former self, and she's received more nerfs than just about any other agent in the entire game. Let's go over some of the huge ones that she received in beta. First off, even if you were walking through her slow, it would still make noise. They patched that pretty quickly. On top of that, the slow orb was way bigger and it lasted for longer. And in addition to that, her barrier was much larger and cheaper, and it would instantly go to max HP. It didn't have the breakable period where it regenerated health. And instead of 400 HP, it had 800 freaking HP. Meaning if you threw this up on pistol round, good luck breaking through it. And even on rifle round, it was a very difficult thing to play around in combination with giant slow orbs that slowed much more than they do today. On top of that, barrier could be cast on little ledges without it breaking, so you could use it to do all sorts of different setups that are just impossible today. And you could actually cast it in the buy round before the round started, which means you could put a whole bunch of players in weird spots, and that was quickly patched out as well. Now, one of the biggest things about old Sage is she could actually heal herself and her teammates for 100 HP over 5 seconds. Now, self-heal is way nerfed compared to what it once was, and this gave Sage a lot of options. Sage was not only the best staller in the game, capable of denying enemy space for a very long time with a massive slow percentage and a giant barrier that instantly was max HP, but also she could heal herself after she was aggressive. So Sage could be a great staller, yes, but was also capable of being aggressive and then healing herself back to full. This DPS Sage playstyle, this attack Sage playstyle, was something that became more and more popular as people realized the possibilities around Sage, her wall, and the fact that you could heal herself to full, which Riot nipped in the bud when they nerfed her self-heal by quite a margin, and ultimately nerfed her heal altogether. So Sage was way stronger than she is today, and we have it tallied at 9 nerfs before the launch of the game and then 10 more nerfs since. This agent has received 19 direct nerfs, so it's no wonder why Sage is no longer a great character or really meta at all. Now, this begs the question though, would old Sage being dropped into the game today still be good? Even if you took away some of the more cheesy aspects of her kit, let's say putting the barriers on little edges and being able to have crazy walls, if that was removed even, and the noise while walking through a slow was removed, which was a rather silly thing that should have gotten nerfed undoubtedly right away, which is what it did. Even without those things, would Sage be strong enough to compete now, like in today's meta? And I would argue, yes, she would, especially on specific maps that she was strong at. Maps like Icebox, for instance, have slowly lost Sage's pick rate due to other characters being more viable, but you supercharge Sage and now she becomes a lot more competitive to pick. And you got to keep in mind that having an 800 HP barrier is actually incredible. That is max health instantly. And I would imagine a ton of strategies around like walling off on bind, the corner, and planting, being able to do stuff like that backed with other utility would be way too strong in certain situations. Now, do I think that old Sage would be the best character in today's meta? Absolutely not. I don't think so at all. And I have a couple of reasons for that. Mainly the fact that other Sentinels are so strong and it's hard to sacrifice them for a Sage. Specifically, I'm talking about Killjoy and Cypher as being incredibly powerful and hard hard to pick over a Sage in a lot of different situations. So then you have to look at the other characters in a composition. Who would you replace? And it doesn't make sense for Sage to fulfill a duelist role, even if she could be an attacker Sage, because you can't dash, double satchel, things like that to create space, but you probably could put Sage in the flex spot of a lot of compositions as someone that could do a lot of different things. And I do think that Sage would probably bump up to like an A tier pick, someone that is just under the best characters in the game, capable of being slotted into a lot of different compositions and basically played as the flexible 5th spot. And basically any of the pick rate right now that Deadlock has, Sage would eat all of that up, and she would most likely eat up a lot of that flexible spot. So less double duelist, less double initiator, and a lot more Sage rocking, maybe in double sentinel compositions, of course. So knowing that old Sage would actually be competitive in the pro meta, why has Riot consistently nerfed Sage and not allowed her to be buffed and buffed and buffed back into relevancy? Now, the answer to that question actually comes down to the win rate problem. And this is an article that came out in 2022, but it's still extremely relevant to this day. This was a State of the Agents by Riot themselves, and they go on to explain that Sage, even though she is perceived as one of the weakest agents in the game, has some of the highest win rates across all skill bands in ranked. You see, Sage falls under a very specific problem, and it's the fact that she's actually incredibly good as players are not near the skill ceiling of coordination and individual play in the game. This means that most ranks, even in her nerfed state right now, she's a very strong character to play with relatively high unmirrored pick rate, which means that when she is picked on a team and the other team doesn't pick her, the win rate of her specifically is higher across the board. And this basically means she's healthy for everywhere but maybe the highest ranks of play and pro play. So if you buff her to be viable at the pro level, the problem is she becomes extremely too powerful at most ranks of play. I mean, if she has like a 52 or 55% win rate unmirrored right now, let's say in gold, but she isn't seeing any pro play, let's say you buffed her all the way to how she would be powerful enough to see play in pro play, then maybe she has a 65% win rate in gold unmirrored. So you have a huge disadvantage not picking her. That's just one example of where if you try to buff a character or force the character into relevancy, but their kit doesn't align with high coordination and a high skill ceiling as much as it does the average player base, then you can have some unforeseen problems. Now, this developer problem isn't new. In fact, every developer that makes a hero shooter has to deal with this because they want some characters to be represented in pro play, but there is some unforeseen consequences when you try to do a top-down balance or balance everything for only the higher echelons or pro play itself, especially when some characters are just easier to assess a lot of their value. And Sage's old version with the powerful wall and slow would undoubtedly be a lot of power that didn't require a lot of skill to access. Now, this is a conversation of balance and design, and we're not going down that rabbit hole in this video. But I did want to give you the reason why it's not so easy to just buff Sage. Now, there are solutions to this. You could alter some of her abilities or change her, but you might be hurting her core identity as a character. And how would you like it if a character that you loved was all of a sudden not the same anymore, fundamentally different, didn't have the same abilities? I could see that being a bit frustrating. Basically, there's no simple answer here, but I do imagine that Riot would buff Sage a couple of times as she starts to fall in pick rate, especially in ranked play, and maybe they have actually bigger aspirations for her in the pro scene down the line, but we'll have to wait and see for that. Anyways, if you enjoyed the content, do me a solid and smash the subscribe. We're a new channel trying to grow, and I would really greatly appreciate it. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.